Okay, today we are solving inequalities. So remember, inequalities are when you see less than or greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So this is basically just like solving an equation, except one rule. And that rule is that if you multiply or divide each side of your equation by a negative number, you have to flip your inequality sign. So if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you flip the inequality sign. So looking at this little example up here, if I was to solve this equation for x, I would need to get rid of the negative 2 by dividing by it. But because I'm dividing by a negative number, this inequality sign will flip. So this makes a positive 1. I flip my sign, and 10 divided by negative 2 makes negative 5. And then now it says x is greater than negative 5. So open circle, shade right. So today we're going to solve inequalities. We're going to graph them on a number line, and then we're also going to practice our interval notation. So like this one, since it's going forever to the right, the numbers are getting bigger, 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 headed to positive infinity. So it would be negative 5, comma, infinity. Open circles are always parentheses. And then because you cannot equal infinity, that is also a parenthesis. So that's what we're going to do today. So basically, if you know how to solve an equation, then you'll be able to do this. There's just the one little detail that if you multiply or divide by a negative number on each side of the inequality symbol, then you will flip your inequality sign. Okay, so let's look at number 1. We're going to solve it, graph it, and then state interval notation. So solve it, graph it, interval notation it. All right, so to get x by itself, I'm going to get rid of the subtraction of 12 by adding 12 to both sides. Negative 12 plus 12 is 0, so shoop, that's gone. I'm going to bring down my 3x. I'm going to bring down my symbol, and 3 plus 12 makes 15. So now to get x by itself, I need to undo this multiplication. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, so all I'm left with is 1x or x. Now because I divided by a positive number, I do not flip this, so it stays the same. And then 15 divided by 3 makes 5. Okay, so this says x is what 5? X is less than 5. Remember, if the pointed end faces the variable, then it means less. So because there's no equal sign, it's an open circle at the 5. And if your answers are less than 5, then I shade left, because less than left, less than left. All your numbers that are less than 5 are to the left. So now to do interval notation, I know that because this graph is going forever to the left, the numbers are getting smaller and smaller, so it's headed to negative infinity. So remember, interval notation, you always put the smaller number first and the bigger number last. So negative infinity is smaller than 5, so interval notation would be negative infinity, comma 5. Open circles are always parentheses, and infinities are always parentheses, because you cannot equal infinity. And that's my answer, and I'm done. So just basically solving an equation. I didn't even do anything fancy here. And practicing the interval notation and the graphing, that's like the lesson before. Okay, looking at number 2. All right, remember, if you have parentheses, you need to distribute whatever is smushed against them. So I'm going to distribute that positive 5. So positive 5 times 2 makes a positive 10. Positive 5 times a negative x makes a negative 5x. I'm going to bring down my symbol, and I'm going to bring down my 41. And then that 6 that was there just comes down. Okay, at this point, remember when you solve an equation, if you have like terms on the left side, you can combine them, or if you have like terms on the right side. Well, clearly there's no like terms on the right side, but I do have like terms on the left side. The 6 and the 10. These are both just regular numbers called constants, so I can combine those. So 6 plus 10 makes 16. Then I'm going to bring down my minus 5x, bring down my less than or equal, and bring down my 41. Okay, remember, if you only have one variable, whatever's smushed with it or divided by it, you want to save that for last, and you're going to move the other guy that's next to it. So if that 16 wasn't there, we'd be ready to get rid of the negative 5. But because the 16 is there, we want to zero it out. So to get rid of a positive 16, we need to subtract it. And the reason it's a positive is because there's nothing to the left of it. So I'm subtracting 16 because 16 minus 16 is 0. So shoop, that's gone. Bring down this minus 5x. Bring down your symbol. And then 41 minus 16 makes 25. And then to get x by itself, I undo this multiplication with division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 makes a positive 1. So I have a positive 1 in front of the x, which I don't have to write. Now, do you notice I divided by a negative? So since I divided by a negative, I'm going to flip this inequality sign. So I'm going to flip it. And then 25 divided by negative 5 makes negative 5. And that's my answer. So if you divide by a negative number, you flip your inequality sign. If you do not divide by a negative number, then you do not flip your inequality sign. Okay, so this time the big mouth faces the x, so this means that the x is greater. So this is x is greater than or equal to negative 5. So because of the equals, it's a closed circle. And if my answers are greater than negative 5, that means my answers are to the right. Because numbers get greater and greater the farther right you go. So this problem, my shading is going to the right, so numbers are getting bigger, 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 so you're headed to positive infinity. So the smaller number would be the negative 5, and the bigger number would be infinity. So interval notation would be negative 5, comma, infinity. Closed circles always get brackets, but infinities always get parentheses. And that's because you cannot equal infinity. You can always get a little bit bigger, and negative infinity, you can always get a little bit smaller. So infinities always get parentheses. And that's the answer. What do you think? As long as you know how to solve an equation, it's not too bad. All right, these next three, I didn't put down a nice little number line for us. So our graphs, we'll still graph them, but they just won't be as fancy looking. All right, what do you think we're going to do first on number 3? Distribute. Since we have parentheses, we need to distribute whatever's smushed against them, which is this positive 2. So 2 times 3n makes a positive 6n, and 2 times 1 makes a positive 2. I'm going to drop down my inequality sign, and I'm going to drop down my 12. Okay, then I'm just going to bring down this plus 22 that's in the back. Okay, once you've distributed, you look for like terms on the left side of the inequality and on the right side. Okay, on the left side, there's no like terms to combine, but on the right side, there is. The 2 and the 22. These are just regular numbers called constants. So I'm going to combine them. So I'm going to bring down my 12, I'm going to bring down my symbol, I'm going to bring down my 6n, and positive 2 plus 22 makes a positive 24. Okay, so since I only have one variable, remember whatever's smushed with it or divided by it, you're going to keep that until the end. So look on the side with your variable, and whatever is added or subtracted to it, you need to zero it out. You need to make it disappear. So to get rid of addition of 24, I'm going to subtract 24. And you have to do it to both sides. All right, so 24 minus 24 is 0. Shoop. Drop your 6 in, drop your symbol, and then 12 minus 24, that makes negative 12. You subtract, take the sign of the larger number. Okay, so now to get n by itself, how do you get rid of that 6? You divide, because to undo multiplication, you divide. So we divide both sides by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, so I'm just left with 1n. And negative 12 divided by 6 is negative 2. Now, will I flip the sign? No. I'm dividing by a positive number, so I do not flip the sign. It doesn't matter that you get a negative answer. It matters if you divide by a negative. So, if you divide by a negative, like up here, you flip the sign. If you divide by a positive, you do not flip the sign. Okay, it's not whether you get a negative answer or not. Okay, now let's graph it. So all I'm going to do is put negative 2 on my number line. Because of the equals, it's a closed circle. Now, I'm going to read from the variable. So we're practicing reading from the variable. We're not going to start with the left side. We're going to read from the variable. Do you see how the pointed end is facing the variable? So that means that this guy's less. Remember, the big mouth eats the bigger guy? So this guy's the bigger guy, so this guy's the lesser guy. So whenever the pointed end faces the variable, that means that this is less. So this is saying n is less than or equal to negative 2. So less than, shades left. Okay, interval notation. Whenever you go left, you get smaller, 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 so you're headed to negative infinity. So interval notation, the smaller number is negative infinity, and the bigger number is negative 2. Closed circles get brackets, infinities get parentheses. And that's our answer, and we're done. Okay, how are you feeling? What do you think of this? All right, let's look at number 4. So, what do you think step 1 is? Distribute. We have parentheses and something smushed against them. So let's distribute. So 3 times x makes 3x. And 3 times negative 5 makes a negative 15. Drop your symbol and drop your negative 2x. Okay. Now you look for like terms on the left side or like terms on the right side. There's no like terms on the left. Are there like terms on the right? Nope. Next, do you notice that there's not just one x? There's 2 of them on opposite sides. So I need to move one of them over. Now, in the past, I've always moved the smaller one, but this time I'm not going to move him, because if I move this one, there will be nothing left over here but a 0. And most students don't want to work with that 0. So I'm actually not going to move the smaller one this time. I'm going to move the 3x over. So to move him over, I have to 0 it out. So to get rid of a positive 3x, I have to do the opposite and subtract it. Okay, so 3x minus 3x is 0. Shoop. The negative 15 drops. The symbol drops. Negative 2x minus 3x makes a negative 5x. And then now that there's only one variable, if there was something added or subtracted to it, I'd get rid of it, but there's not. So I'm ready to undo the multiplication. So I divide both sides by negative 5. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 makes a positive 1. Negative 15 divided by negative 5 makes a positive 3. Now, will I flip my sign? Yes, I am dividing by a negative number, so my sign will flip around. So if you divide by a negative number, flip the sign. If you divide by a positive number, do not. Okay, now let's graph it. 3 is the number. Because there's no equals, it's an open circle. Now, this time, the big mouth is facing the variable. That means that the x is greater. So this says x is greater than 3, and greater is to the right. So I'm going to shade everything to the right. Okay, interval notation. Because I'm going to the right, I'm getting bigger, 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 so I'm headed to positive infinity. So it starts at 3, it goes to positive infinity, open circle gets a parenthesis, infinity always gets a parenthesis. And that's my answer. You feel like you've got the hang of it? Okay, I think we'll just skip number 5 here because I feel like most of us probably have this pretty good right now. And that's all for this lesson. Smiley face.